can there be such different functioning in the same brain?
Bundy himself perpetuated the fantasy that he came from this perfectly normal childhood.
So I interviewed family members. Things were horrendous for Bundy from conception onward. When you couple some kind of brain dysfunction with a history of horrible early ongoing abuse, the social, the psychological, the biological forces that came together, you get a super dangerous person.
Thanks.
Well, good afternoon. How are you, Ophelia?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me today to talk about Crazy, Not Insane.
Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, how did you come to meet Dr. Lewis and the idea to talk about this documentary and the subject matter?
Sure. So back in 2016, Laura Dern and Alex Gibney decided to work on a fictional series about a psychiatrist who examines people on the death row. So we started doing research and we, came upon Dr. Dorothy Lewis's work. She had written a fascinating book that we read, and we just loved her voice, but also just the stories and the characters. And we reached out to her to see if she would be interested in kind of being a consultant on the fiction series. And she responded. We met up with her. She came to our office with a stack of VHS tapes, and we watched them, and thankfully they were functioning. And she showed us some, just mind-blowing footage of some of her subjects and the patients that she had seen. And so we started working with her, and then soon enough we realized that she, not only, kind of knows the subject really well and has these amazing tapes, but also is a fascinating character herself. And so Alex Gibney decided that he really wants to also make a documentary about her. So that's kind of how it all started.
Well, Dr. Lewis has interviewed over 100 murderers, death row inmates, some of America's most notorious serial killers. How did you go about what to feature for the documentary? You had such an incredible pool of material.
Yes, we had a very long list of cases and characters that we were considering. We spent some time researching all of them, just kind of deciding which ones to include in the film. Some of that was decided by the available materials, like some of it was dictated by the tapes that she had. I mean, when we found a fascinating tape and character, we knew that we wanted them in the film. Like Max, for example, he hadn't killed anyone, but he had attempted to kill, and he was such a fascinating character that we really wanted to include in the film. So it kind of was, we went different ways. Ted Bundy, for example, we didn't have a videotape of him, but we had the audio tape, but also Ted Bundy, we were debating whether to include him or not because he's such a famous serial killer at this point. There are way too many things about him. But the reason we included him in the film was because how important he was to Dorothy, because it was still a case that she was working on years, decades after he had been executed. She was still trying to find these answer the questions that she still had about him. So that's why we included him in the film as well.
And to Dr. Lewis, was she giving you full access to her and her cases and her opinions? Was she an open book for you?
Yes, she has a basement full of cabinets and boxes of things, and she just let us in. We went through all her, well, I can't say we went through all of it, but we definitely went through a lot of it, and she was very open. Of course, we would show her if we found something that we were interested in, we would show it to her, and she would say, oh, you can't use this because of this. There were some legal, obviously, issues that we would have to consider, but then she would say, oh yeah, this person gave me permission, so you can use it. It was a conversation, but she definitely was very open, not only with the cases, but her family was very collaborative. And so, yeah, it was just a great collaboration with her.
Well, I was going to ask that. So any legal problems along the way, or was it considered public domain? I'm sure you had many attorneys that vetted everything before you finished the film.
Yes. Yeah, we had to obviously take into consideration the legal aspect of things. And when we were deciding which ones to use or not, for example, there were tapes that we didn't use because of legal issues. You know, we had a tape of an inmate that who's still on the death row. He's alive, and you know, even though it was a fascinating tape, there we would have legal issues if we used the tape. So we decided not to. So you know, we had to make certain. We had some limitations and decisions had to be made based on that. But for sure, that the tapes that we ended up using, we either got permission from the living people, or you know, it was included already in the case, so it was available, or different reasons. But our lawyers vetted, yes, the film before it could be released.
And I had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Lewis the other day, and I was she's hypnotic. I mean, I could just listen to her go on. Felt like I was back in college, you know, just being fascinated.
Yes.
Anyway, but my point is she can talk. So for making this documentary, how did you edit her down? Because I didn't know when to stop her. I just kept listening and listening because she is so fascinating.
She is fascinating. She has a lot to say and to tell. I mean, honestly, like sometimes even after, you know, 4 years of working with her, sometimes she would still tell me a story that I hadn't heard. And, you know, I would be surprised. I was like, you had never told me this story, you know? And so she still has a lot obviously to say, but, I think she, you know, I think the way her mind doesn't work in a linear way. So she does, you know, she starts telling a story, then she will remember something associated with that story that has to do with another case. So she will kind of go tell you that thing, then come back to another thing, then come back to the initial question. So for editing reasons, it was a little tricky. I mean, our editor did struggle in terms of not even cutting down, but cutting Dorothy, you know, just like in general, it was a bit tricky. So, you know, there's like pros and cons. The pro is that she's so open and she doesn't hold anything back. She will tell you all these stories. So it's a good thing. But then the con is that you have to work really hard on editing her. Yeah.
Well, did you have enough material to make maybe a limited series or another film? Because there's so much content.
Yeah, we funny thing is that our editor, maybe a month or 2 months into cutting, he did turn to us and he said, you know, maybe this needs to be a series. Just again, because of the number of the cases that were available to us. But I think the reason why we pitched it as a film and we stuck to it is because of like the film was about her. It wasn't really about serial killers or like we would like to think that we made a movie about Dr. Lewis, and to understand her, you also have to kind of see the cases that she worked on. But the film is really a portrait of her.
She's definitely a groundbreaking doctor. I mean, I had so much respect for her, and she was just so fascinating. And you guys did a great documentary on her life and her work. And thank you so much for talking to me today. And let's talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
And I maybe should mention that the film premiered last night on HBO, and it's available to watch on HBO Max starting today.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you.